I'm your host Abz and welcome to another Juicy Lore video. Here is every single Locust race from the Gears of War universe explained. The Locust races include the Locust Boomers, the Locust Kantus, the Locust Berserkers, the Sires, the Locust Ragers, and of course the Locust Drones, alongside their Grenadier and Theron variants, as well as the Scions. Make sure to turn on all post notifications so you don't miss another lore video. And without further ado, let's jump straight into this.
They're trying to get out. Should we be trying to help them?
I don't think so. We don't know what's in there. Could be something contaminated or worse.
In the early Pendulum Wars, unknown to the general population, those exposed to emulsion fumes began to suffer from emulsion poisoning, known as Rustlung. The emulsion miners were the most affected, and the children born of the emulsion miners were born with deformities and emulsion sickness as well. The coalition of ordered governments wanted to capitalise on emulsion and not face reparations for its health effects. Therefore, they commissioned the New Hope Research Facility under the Department of Health by the Monroe administration. So the Sires were the human children, mutated from emulsion poisoning and genetic experimentation, and were the ancestors to the Locust Horde. The director of the facility, Dr. Niall Sampson, was tasked with finding a cure. As he began to inject emulsion doses in the children and study its effects, he began to realise that emulsion could cause point mutations, leading Niles to believe that he could not only bring a cure to Rustlung, but also evolve the human race into an immortal and superior species. Transgenic experimentation was involved by mutating the emulsion miners' children with the DNA of the indigenous creatures from the Hollow, transforming them into what he called the Sires, distempered, highly aggressive, uncontrollable and genetically unstable. So as Niles stated, the path to every breakthrough is paved with failure. Before the first successful Locust Drone hybrids, they had created many unstable specimens, but they remained in stasis. But Niles stated that they were able to have a breakthrough as one of the miners' children was resistant to aging and disease and was raised as one of their own. In the previous facility, which was the New Hope Research Facility, they had problems with genetic stability. The Sires were distempered and sterile, and this was a problem for obvious reasons, as the Sires were very difficult to control, and of course they were unable to reproduce as well. But Locust, they were different. They were highly controllable and they were the perfect soldiers, and they were able to reproduce well as well. So what made them different? Well, what made them different was their cells. The emulsion miners' children provided a genetic repository, as did the indigenous creatures of the Hollow. But when the extent of one very special child's genetic immunity to emulsion became clear, who was of course Mira, Niles and the scientists' work began to soar. Mira was horrifically, monstrously bred with the Sires, and her stem cells were complementary to Sire DNA, which produced the successful Locust Drone hybrids and the Locust. So Locust Drones, usually referred to as grubs by the Gears, are the foot soldiers of the Locust Horde. Completely loyal to their queen, the drones are willing to toss their lives away in a second to kill a single gear, and many different classes of Locust Drones specialise in different forms of combat within the Queen's Guard of the Locust Horde. So Locust Drones are born and bred for combat. They are fearless even when outnumbered. There had been reports of Locust Drones appearing on the surface of Sarah, stealing children and other humans decades before the Pendulum Wars. Up until just before Emergence Day, these have turned into nothing more than fairy tales and urban legends. Drone anatomy is actually quite similar to humans at first glance. They possess 2 arms, 2 legs, a pair of nostrils, 2 eyes, a digestive tract, a jaw filled with teeth, 5 digits on each hand, spinal cord, and a rather normal looking torso supported by a humanoid ribcage. Drones also seem to have a low tolerance for bright lights. So one of their main differences from humans is that all Locust Drones are covered in a thick white hide which has gone pale. This skin is practically rock hard in terms of durability, severely limiting the usage of cutting and slashing weapons against them. Now the Therons actually discovered this on or soon after Emergence Day, when they found that they were unable to defend themselves with their bayonets and combat knives. However, it has been known that if enough brute force was put behind it, a rifle-mounted bayonet could easily skewer a Locust drone. But eventually it was demonstrated by the cog gear Ty Kaliso that chainsaws would be an excellent weapon to pierce through a Locust drone skin, eventually leading to the creation of the Mark II Lancer assault rifle, which were outfitted with chainsaw bayonets. Now, the male Locust drones tended to be around 6'7" on average, but there were notable Locust drones who were much larger and taller. One example being General RAAM, who was a mighty 10 foot tall, so he was a beast. And another example would be RAAM's predecessor, Srark, who came in at 12 feet tall, so he was humongous. Now, it is unknown as to why some Locust drones were much larger, but one of my assumptions could just be that, just like with humans, in rare instances some humans are much larger than your average humans due to a rare disorder resulting from increased levels of growth hormone. It could just be the same case with the drones, but that's just a theory. The female drones, however, were far more dangerous.
There's a courtyard at the other end of your building. That's your best bet.
Copy that.
Well, we sure as shit can't stay here. You're paired.
Yeah, that's right, asshole. Question is, who are you?
Oh shit, quiet. Don't move.
What was that?
A berserker. She can hear us. She can smell us.
Get out of here. We gotta get fucking out of here, man.
Oh my god. Control, this is Delta. We have a berserker in the vicinity. Please advise.
Hold your fire, Delta. Standard weapons won't work. Do you still have the Hammer of Dawn?
Affirmative, Control.
You've only got minutes of satellite coverage. Get her outside and use the hammer. That's the only thing that'll work.
Wilco, Delta out. Alright guys, sit tight. We came here to help you, and that's what we're gonna do. Dom, let's go.
So Berserkers are female Locust drones. They are blind but powerful. Berserkers were known for their highly developed sense of hearing and smell, which compensated for their blindness. They had extremely durable bodies due to their bullet-resistant armor, and they were known for their near-constant state of extremely aggressive behavior. Even though Berserkers are blind, they use their sense of smell and hearing to find their targets, but Berserkers can be killed once their extremely tough skin is heated or set ablaze, which softens it and allows significantly more damage to be done, and they're also fast enough to catch a speeding train, as one Berserker caught up to the Tyro pillar which Delta squad was on, and the Berserker actually jumped on as well. So Berserkers are roughly 10 foot tall on average, and they have bullet resistant armor. So those are the regular Locust Berserkers, and they are of course a force to be reckoned with. Now Berserkers are seen throughout the Locust War, but Berserkers were never encountered during the Lambent pandemic, which was 17 years after Emergence Day, apart from the Lambent Berserker, which we'll break down in a minute. Now it is possible that the flooding of the Hollows killed most of the Berserkers and the remaining were kept hidden. And at the end of the Locust War, when the Imulsion countermeasure weapon was activated, if any regular Berserkers did survive the Imulsion countermeasure weapon, it is unknown what they became when the Locust became the Swarm. Now it was speculated by Colonel Victor Hoffman that drones reproduced through rape, which is really dark and just shows how brutal the Locusts were really. And the female drones, who were of course the Berserkers, they were constantly in a fit of rage and would accidentally kill any Locust drone that would try to mate with them. However, this would be an evolutionary disadvantage, as every species needs to reproduce to survive. So Locust drones were able to breed with Berserkers, and it seemed like the high-ranking Locust would have breeding rights over the other Locust, similar to how in nature, you know, the more dominant males have breeding rights. But another process to create more drones was to capture humans from the surface and use Niall Sampson's genetic research to genetically mutate them into Locust drones. So we've spoken about the regular Berserkers, but let's talk about the Lambent Berserkers, who are Berserkers that had become hosts to Lambency. So Lambent Berserkers, who were also referred to as Lambent Zerkers, were the outcome of Berserkers that turned Lambent, and they appeared around 18 months after the sinking of Jacinto, so only towards the end of the Locust War. So Lambent Berserkers are larger and more deadlier than the regular Berserkers, so they are an absolute force to be reckoned with, right? They boasted superior strength and agility, and they were also capable of jumping in the air to launch a powerful ground blow, and the regular Berserkers weren't actually able to jump. So the Lambent Berserkers had an advantage there. And the Lambent Berserkers also had 4 blade-like tentacles flailing around their backs. And just like the regular Berserkers, a Lambent Berserker had excellent smell and hearing as well, but their eyesight was still just as bad. And Lambent Berserkers were actually a lot more durable than the regular Berserkers, as a Lambent Berserker was able to withstand a Hammer of Dawn strike, whereas a regular Berserker would become extremely damaged by a Hammer of Dawn strike. So the only real way to kill a Lambent Berserker was to attack its exposed chest cavity, which was protected by its ribcage. So in order to expose this cavity, the most common way was when the Berserker prompted an attack, whether it be charging or leaping in the air. The other way was to use incendiary weapons on the Berserker. It would not flinch the Lambent Berserker, but their ribcage would automatically open, exposing their chest cavity. And after a lot of damage, the Lambent Berserkers also begin to leak emulsion as well, and they leave behind walls of emulsion vapors wherever it went. And when the Lambent Berserker does die, it begins to self-destruct, flailing wildly before violently exploding. So you really need to get out of harm's way when it explodes. As we know, the Lambent explode when they die. So when a Lambent Berserker explodes, you need to get out of there. And the Lambent Berserkers are also slightly taller than the regular Berserkers, coming in at 10 foot 10 inches tall on average, which is close to 11 foot. And then we have the Matriarch, or Subject UL1192, which was the first Locust drone created at the Mount Kadar laboratory, and the Matriarch was actually the original Berserker, the female species of the Locust Horde. The Matriarch was created by Dr. Niall Sampson and his team of scientists by combining the embryonic stem cells of Mirror, a human with a natural immunity to emulsion, and sire DNA in order to create a new race of human hybrids that would be immune to emulsion and be used as a strong military force. So the Matriarch was the mother of the Locust Horde and reproduced the first generation of drones. The Matriarch had an innate ability to integrate her mind into the hive mind and allowed Mirror to completely control over the Locust. She was what connected Mirror's daughter, Reina Diaz, and her granddaughter, Kate Diaz, to the swarm. And only one has been known to exist, so it is very rare compared to the regular Berserkers. And just a bit about the hive mind itself. So the hive mind was a psychomagnetic link held by all members of the Locust Horde and the swarm as a collective consciousness. The hive mind was used to command and communicate with the Locust, making them the perfect soldiers. It was unintentionally created by Dr. Niall Sampson through Mirror, whose embryonic stem cells were used in the creation of the Locust Horde, creating a plane of existence where the consciousness of the Locust were connected. Now only females related to Mirror were able to control the hive mind, such as the Matriarch, the original Berserker, which was created from Mirror herself, which amplified her connection and power. The link is located within the temporal lobe and is hereditary, as it was passed down to Mirror's human daughter, Reina Torres, who also passed it down to her daughter, Kate Diaz. Now the hive mind is also capable of preserving and transferring consciousness, making one practically immortal. However, when the hive physically lacks a queen, they remain unguided until they seek a vessel for their queen, preferably related to Mirror, because of that connection. Now the Matriarch is a powerful, heavily armoured enemy, and just like the regular Berserkers, she is blind and relies on a sense of smell and hearing to locate her prey, which she usually attempts to kill by bludgeoning with her fists. The Matriarch has other weapons at its disposal though, other than its overwhelming brute strength, which the regular Berserkers rely on. So its scream is loud enough that it can temporarily incapacitate anyone within its range, and it can attack at range by flinging the spikes on its back. Now these spikes are explosive and if not removed quickly will detonate and kill anyone that they impale. Now the Matriarch's weakness is slightly similar to the Lambent Berserker's weakness. Now the Lambent Berserker's weakness was a chest cavity that would become exposed, but the Matriarch's weakness was a large glowing blister on its back. Now this wasn't protected at all, but this can be difficult to shoot since the Matriarch will quickly turn its attention towards anyone who lands a hit. So this is lore to do with the Queen's Guard of the Locust Drones. So with that out of the way, let's move to our first subclass, who are the Locust Beast Riders. Now the Beast Rider was a Locust drone that rode on a Bloodmount, Reaver, or even the Brumac. So they were assigned to ride the hollow creatures that were tamed and used by the Locust. The Beast Rider either used a Hammerburst assault rifle or the Boltok pistol, and the Beast Riders rode on top of Brumacs and Reavers during the E-Day assault. The Beast Rider was a dreaded enemy that inflicted heavy casualties on the Gears, and the Beast Riders tended to be part of the cavalry unit, and they would always wear their signature Beast Rider helmet. Next up we have the Bolters. Now the Bolters were a class of drone in the Locust Horde. Like their name suggests, they only wield a Boltok pistol and are very skilled in its use, so they were a specialist unit. Their name also suggests their speed, as they tend to dart around to rush and attack the humans. They tend to hide behind cover to reload and pop out to fire. Using such rapid tactics give them their name. They are easily distinguished from regular drones by their improved armor, which includes a full helmet and shoulder plates. We also have the Cyclops, who was a Locust drone named for the monocular targeting helmet that they wear. Although the Cyclops was equipped with a Hammerburst assault rifle, their most infamous trait is their habit of looting human weaponry, which mainly involved the Mark II Lancers. From the Cyclops slaughtering fallen Gears, they used the Lancers to deadly effect against their former owners, and they were really successful in doing so. They even came to terms in using the Lancer chainsaw bayonet, in which they would scream in laughter upon cutting up a Gear soldier. So the Cyclops were like scavengers on the battlefield, and they were more so standard infantry just like the standard Locust drones. We also have the Locust Disciple, who was a ferocious Locust drone unleashed upon the coalition of world governments during the early years of the Locust War. Now the lead scientist of the Locust Horde, Ukon, who was a mad scientist, he actually harnessed the power of Imulsion to build his army. Resulting experiments with Locust drones led to the creation of the deadly Disciple. Now the Disciples had grey skin with yellow Imulsion bioluminescent veins. These enhanced drones formed the fierce and unrelenting front line of Ukon's army, and each Disciple wore an injection harness that delivered a continual flow of Imulsion into their bodies, amplifying the power of their attacks and granting them increased resilience and strength. And when they were killed, they released the trapped Imulsion within their bodies, turning the surrounding area into a toxic kill zone. Now it remains unknown as to why Ukon decided to inject Imulsion into the Locust, given the fact that the threat of lambency was widely known amongst the Horde by the time Gears tactics took place, which was 1 year after Emergence Day, because injecting these Locusts with a mutagenic organism that infects the host against their own kind seems really counterproductive to the Locust Horde, but it is possible that the Imulsion went through the Lightmass process, removing the deadly fungal spores from the Imulsion. We also have the Flame Drones, and these were variants of drones that only appeared 6 weeks after Emergence Day, so they were actually very rare. The Flame Drones carried fuel tanks on their backs, attached to a Scorcher flamethrower, similar to that of Flame Grenadiers and Flame Boomers. Now while they did carry a Scorcher flamethrower and back-mounted fuel tanks, similar to the Flame Grenadier and the Flame Boomer, they did not wear the same helmet as them. Instead, they wore standard drone helmet variations. They also had less health than a Flame Grenadier, having the same health as a regular drone. And then we have the Locust Grappler. So the Grappler drone was the Locust Shock Trooper, used in boarding actions during the assault on Landown and the siege of Jacinto. They appear to be like normal drones, with the exception of a unique helmet and grappling hook. This helmet may be used to help the Grappler adjust to the rapid change of light from their home in the hollow to the surface, as they are only ever seen whenever they come out of openings, though it could also possess distance measuring equipment needed to judge how far to throw their grappling hooks. Grapplers are deployed in small strike teams and are often used for quick insertions on enemy positions or ambushes. Heavily fortified positions such as the deck of the assault derrick or the roof of multi-story buildings are not enough to stop their onslaught. They can quickly scale vertical surfaces with their grappling hooks, and this also allows them to be used as very effective snipers, being able to get to the highest points on the battlefield, and they even carry the one shot on occasion. Next up we have the Locust Gunners. So the Gunners was a specialized type of Locust drone that are expert users of the Troika heavy machine gun. They are encountered manning Troika turrets in camps and settlements. Gunners actually wear scuba-like helmets that protect them from a variety of shots. They are usually found in Locust bases, protecting a camp, and not on an open battlefield due to the difficulty in Troika transport. Therefore, they are mostly found in levels in the Hollow or Nexus. When Gunners are alone, they pose a low to medium threat. However, when they are supported by other Locusts, they can be very deadly, by which they force you into cover while flanked by drones. Despite being a Troika specialist, some Gunners, or at least drones wearing gunner helmets, attack you with hammerbursts and act like regular drones if forced to abandon their Troikas. And they often come with a spotter who will alert the gunner to a cog presence. So if the spotter is killed, the gunner will no longer constantly fire its Troika, as it will not know where you are. Instead, there will be a 1 to 2 second wait before they fire at you, which can be used to fire first. So let's talk about the Locust spotters since we're on the topic. Now the spotter seems to be a Locust drone who looks out for a gunner who is manning a Troika. And we know this because in Gears 1, Marcus says there's a spotter on the right, to which Min responds, take him out first. So there are always two Locusts at a Troika, one manning the Troika and the other can be assumed as the spotter. In Gears of War 2, sometimes a drone will man a large spotlight, blinding gears as well as making nearby drones and gunners aware of your presence. This can be assumed to be a spotter. They generally have lower health and will operate the spotlight much like a Troika but without the constant hail of bullets. They wear standard drone armor with their signature spotter helmet and are a specialist unit within the Locust army. Next up we have the Locust Miners. So the miner drones were a class of Locust who mined ore and other resources for the Horde. They were responsible for creating new tunnels in the Hollow and maintaining them. Now these miners are one of the most important class of drones as they are responsible for the acquisition of resources to manufacture the Locust war machine. They may also be important as builders that construct the architecture of the Locust Nexus. Miners are also responsible for directing corpses on where to dig, as well as providing the Locust army on intelligence and logistics to create strategically sound emergence holes. They wear a special helmet which protects them from harm, and due to the fact that they are not seen in combat, it is possible that miners are non-combatants and act as a logistical reserve. And they also wear standard drone armor along with their signature miner helmet. And finally we have the Locust Sniper drones. So the Locust Sniper drones, they were expert marksmen who can always be found wielding the longshot sniper rifle and less commonly the mortar. They highly resemble the Locust drones despite their goggles, and they use infrared thermal goggles to help locate enemies, and they occasionally wear helmets as well. They use cover such as buildings and alleyways, and they can almost always be found at a vantage point. These elite shock troops are feared by cog gears, but they aren't always as ruthless as drones. However, this doesn't make them less bloodthirsty as they snipe any gear in their way. We have the Lambent drone. So these were Locust drones that had been exposed to Imulsion, enough to become Lambent, but not long enough to mutate into Drudges. Lambent drones essentially share the same appearance to their Locust counterparts, with the exception of their glowing skin. During the Lambent pandemic, the drones have a slightly different appearance because they didn't look like the drones encountered in Nexus, and they didn't look like the Drudges. That the Lambent Drudges were actually the next step in the drone's mutation.
Whatever the hell that is, that's a new world record in ugly.
So Lambent Drudges were Lambent life forms that appeared on the surface of Sera around 17 years after Emergence Day. They were seen by humans in 17 AE, but they were fighting against the Locust underground before Emergence stage during the Lambent War. But firstly, let's give a quick overview of Imulsion and Lambency. So Imulsion was a parasitic fungal organism that appeared as a naturally occurring luminescent golden highly volatile liquid, and it was found in the geological formations beneath Ceres' surface, which was known as the Hollow. It was commonly refined into a fuel source and became the most sought after resource on the planet. So the Lambent, or glowies, refer to infected mutated variants of all the life on Ceres caused by prolonged exposure to Imulsion. So most Lambent differ in behaviour, appearance, strength and death from their original counterparts, and while infection by Imulsion in the case of Rustlung was discovered by the coalition of ordered governments in the early Pendulum Wars era, the Lambent were only discovered much later. So originally Locust Drones, Drudges were monstrous beings who could hideously mutate themselves to turn the tide of battle into their favour. So Drudges were originally Lambent drones, who were of course originally Locust drones, who had endured a prolonged exposure to Imulsion, and the Lambent Drudge was the next stage of the Lambent drones mutation. And as you can see, the Lambent Drudges, they were hideous, and they had a lot of mutations as well, which we'll dive into now. So during combat, the Lambent Drudges have two phases. So phase 1 is actually pre-mutation. So before the Lambent Drudges mutated, Drudges posed as much threat as a standard grub would. They moved slowly, they were vulnerable to the chainsaw and the bayonet charge attacks, and they only used hand-burst assault rifles in battle. They were also unable to take cover, but Drudges were still dangerous in their own right. Close-ranged enemies would be greeted with a fiery bath of Imulsion, and like all Lambent lifeforms, Drudges exploded violently upon death. If they were heavily damaged, unmutated Drudges were known to run towards enemies and detonate themselves to ensue chaos. And the Drudges were not adversely affected by headshots. Instead, their weak point was a glowing Imulsion-filled cyst located at their stomach. Any attack to this would severely injure a Drudge, and if you were using high-powered weapons such as the long-shot sniper rifle, this would instantly kill the Drudge. But other weapons would simply stumble it, and using most high-powered weapons anywhere else would cause the Drudge to instantly mutate instead. So phase 1 was pre-mutation, but phase 2 was the mutation, and of course they had several of those mutations. So Drudges were unique in their ability to spontaneously mutate during combat, making them deadly opponents. Mutations provided them with enhanced combat ability, providing extra firepower, range, and hardiness. Drudges only mutate when their health is sufficiently depleted, but not enough that it kills them outright. And Drudges can actually perform several mutations simultaneously as well. But the downside is that once mutated, Drudges cannot actually return to phase 1. So once they've undertook that mutation, they can't go back to the pre-mutation state. So the Lambent Drudges, they actually have 3 mutations. So let's break each one down. So the first mutation is the head snake. So the head snake mutation was where the Drudge's head surges upwards as its neck elongates, forming a thick serpent-like appendage. The head itself mutates into a gaping triangular mouth, which could spray a stream of superheated Imulsion at nearby opponents. And this was similar to getting scorched by a Scorcher flamethrower, so it was really deadly. But if the body was destroyed first, the head would still survive and move around like a snake, giving it the nickname Head Snake, and it would bite opponents with its mouth. So mutation 1 was the head snake, but mutation 2 was the arms. Now the second mutation in phase 2 was where the Drudge's arms mutate into distorted, over-elongated limbs with giant claws. While the Lambent Drudge gained a massive boost in close-range combat, it was unable to use its handburst in this state. Despite this, they could use other forms of damage, for instance using their claws to throw Imulsion bombs at enemies. Enemies that came too close to the Drudge in this mutation also risked getting ripped apart by their claws. Now if both of the Drudge's claws were destroyed, the Drudge would charge at the enemy before detonating themselves, unless they mutated their head alongside its arms. Essentially, during this mutation you really want to avoid any close range fights with the Lambent Drudge. Otherwise you might get ripped to shreds by the Drudge's claws, you might get an Imulsion bomb thrown at you, so just stay out of harm's way. That is the best way to combat mutation 2. And then we have the third and final mutation, and that is the leg stalk. Now, the third and final Drudge mutation sacrificed all mobility for a cover busting advantage of height and acting as a carrier spawner for polyps. So essentially the Drudge's legs fused and grew into a stalk-like growth. So from this point, the Drudge could continue firing at opponents with its hammerburst assault rifle if it did not mutate its arms, and the Drudge was also capable of spawning, like I just said, the polyps from its trunk to assist it in fighting opponents. So the Savage Drones were the most common of their Savage brethren. The Savage Drones carved a new existence on the surface of Sera quite effectively. The Savage Drones were stranded after the flooding of their subterranean homeland, the Hollows. They were the most numerous members of their tribes, and they made up the bulk of the Savage Locusts' fighting force. Many took residence in the infamous Seran Deadlands alongside other Savage Locust, and like all Savage Locust, the Savage Drone salvaged the MK1 Lancer assault rifle, which was also known as the Retro Lancer, which had the bayonet, not the chainsaw, among other weapons to do battle against foes, but they did enjoy the raw power that the Retro Lancer offered. They also had to adapt to new tactics with their underground tunnels, learning how to erupt from the ground to ambush enemies or reinforce allies. The Savage Drones have adapted their armor to their new environment, sporting a filtered breathing apparatus and a tinted mask due to the ever-present sandstorms of the Deadlands. They also wear simple cloth wraps that wind around their arms and legs to shield their skin from the sun. And due to the loss of their way of life in combination with their adoption of the MK1 Lancer, many Savage Drones have discarded standard battle tactics and will bayonet charge an enemy without warning, and they were also around 6'7" on average, just like the standard Locust Drones. We also have the Savage Marauders. Now, it has been theorized that the Locust dubbed the Savage Marauders of the first kind of Locust Drones to form any sort of organization outside of the Hollow after the events of Operation Hollow Storm. Now, this is really important, and this signifies how important Savage Marauders were to the Savage Locust, because they were essentially the founding fathers of the Savage Locust faction when you think of it. With the success of Operation Hollow Storm for the coalition of ordered governments, the Locust homeland of the Hollows was flooded, forcing any surviving Locust to take flight to the surface world. Many of these Locusts weren't able to join up with the Locust Queen aligned remnant of the Horde, turning savage. So the Savage Marauders, made of former Locust Drones, were the first among their number to form any sort of organization outside the Queen's remnant with their patchwork raiding parties. They ultimately became a sort of precursor to the Savage Locust, but it is unknown if the Marauders were eventually phased out with the more common Savage Locusts. They were brutal, bloodthirsty creatures who most often travelled in war parties in their constant search for supplies, and the Savage Marauders would wear a conch shell, and this is the same conch shell used to signal other Savage Locusts of the sighting of enemy forces. So the Rager was a specialised Locust breed that appeared during the Locust War, and were known for their ability to metamorphose into monstrous forms. Due to their reckless abandon, large amounts of Ragers died off early in the Locust War, becoming virtually extinct. So, the Ragers acted as a reconnaissance unit for the Locust Horde when unraged, but would quickly turn into assault troops when enraged. The Ragers were a subspecies of Locust Drone, so they were much different to the traditional Locust Drones, and they were extremely short-tempered, which you may be able to tell already. They would have thick grey skin with sharp claws, and they looked slightly larger than the Locust Drone in their unraged state. The Ragers were known to use the breech shot straight pull bolt action rifle. Now, this weapon was seen during the early days of the Locust War. It was built around the UIR's GZ-18 Marks sniper rifle, many of which were captured by the Locust Horde following Emergence Day, which was then heavily modified by the Locust with crude attachments and paint jobs, creating the breech shot rifle. When in their more docile state, Ragers can be beaten much like normal Locust troops. They can be gibbed with explosives, headshot with a precision weapon, or executed with a chainsaw bayonet. The rather lithe and unassuming Ragers were known to carry the breech shot rifle in their unraged state, but they were far more dangerous when enraged. When angered, they would go into a state of metamorphosis due to emotion build-up inside them. The emotion build-up inside them led to several changes in the Rager's body structure, entering a rage of metamorphosis. A Rager's skin would shift to a bloody red colour, they would double in muscle mass, sprout blood red spikes, and move with almost animalistic fury, essentially becoming a miniature berserker for a short amount of time. However, they cannot withstand the same amount of fire that the Berserker can, but the Ragers in their enraged state can cause havoc very quickly and decimate many cog troops without much difficulty, so they are not to be underestimated. They are also a lot more durable in this form, so once enraged, heavy weapons and headshots are devised to deal with them, and in their mutated state, Ragers can only be chainsawed and retrocharged from behind. Fortunately for the gears fighting them, they cannot stay in their enraged state for prolonged periods of time. Because of this, such moments pass by quickly and the Rager is returned back to its normal form after a short amount of time. Ragers also had restraints around their ankles and arms, so perhaps the Locust Horde had to restrain the Ragers on many occasions, as they understood their very short-tempered habits and violent tendencies of the Ragers. Otherwise, the Ragers may just attack their own kind, for all we know. The Ragers would rush into battle unlike the traditional Locust Drones, so due to the Ragers' reckless abandon, large amounts of Ragers died off early in the war, becoming virtually extinct. And this was given as an explanation of why they appear as a new enemy in Gears of War Judgment, while not appearing in games that came later chronologically, as they were not seen in Gears of War 1, 2 or 3, but a number of Ragers were encountered during Baird and his squad's return to Halvor Bay in Gears of War 3 Aftermath, and Baird was very surprised to see them, as they were believed to have been wiped out early in the Locust War. These Ragers were allied with the Savage Locust and became even more feral than they were at the Horde's command. After the former members of Kilo Squad left Halvor Bay, Ragers had apparently become extinct after the Imulsion countermeasure weapon was deployed, though it is unknown if any mutated to become part of the swarm. So the Grenadiers were Locust shock troopers, often seen wielding a Nasher shotgun and bolt-up pistol, or throwing bolo grenades. Grenadiers should always be remembered for their weapons and their fighting style. They always use their Nasher shotgun in standard combat and should never be allowed to get in close. Their other go-to weapon that they use are their bolo frag grenades, and at times are also seen with the Boltok or the Lancer assault rifle. And they had a better, more improved physique over the Locust Drones, so they were the ultimate assault troops for the Locust, and the Grenadiers were known to be extremely aggressive. Their homeland was the Hollow, just like the other Locust, and they had grey skin with black scales. Their skin is practically rock hard in terms of durability, severely limiting the usage of cutting and slashing weapons against them. This was discovered on or soon after E-Day, when the Therons found that they were unable to defend themselves with their bayonets and combat knives, and so the chainsaw bayonets made an excellent addition to the Lancer for the cog to pierce through Locusts like the Grenadiers, who like to get up close and personal. So these are the base Grenadier variants, and then we also have many different Grenadier subclasses, which I'll be breaking down as well. So first up, we've got the Grenadier Elites. So these were the higher rank of the standard Grenadier, and they can take and deal a lot more damage. Like the Grenadier, they are always equipped with a Nasher shotgun, bolo grenades and a Boltok pistol. They wear studded shoulder armor and a chest strap, and they appear to be much more seasoned combat operatives, as evidenced by their constant flanking attempts on higher difficulties. Their barbaric armor suggests that they are rather brutal fighters, and up close they prefer to go for a one-shot kill with a Nasher shotgun. Grenadier Elites are very skilled with the bolo grenades, so just because you're in cover doesn't necessarily mean that you're safe. And in battle they act almost leader-like, and rush in to kill any cog gear with their shotgun, and then they run off to the next foe. Grenadier Elites are therefore considered quite deadly, and they should not be underestimated. So in essence, they are the Locust's elite assault troops, and they were seen throughout the Locust War just like the standard Grenadier variants. And then we also have the Flame Grenadiers. So the Flame Grenadier was a Locust Grenadier armed exclusively with the Scorcher flamethrower. And, like all Grenadier classes, they specialised in close quarters combat. They were first encountered during the destruction of Halvor Bay, though only as prototypes to test their capabilities. And later on the Coalition encountered more armoured Grenadiers during the evacuation of Alima, and later Operation Hollow Storm. Flame Grenadiers are also equipped with a backpack fuel tank that significantly increases the fuel capacity of the Scorcher. They are equipped with the same armor that the Locust Grenadier Elites have on, but the Flame Grenadiers also have a heat resistant helmet and a back mounted fuel pack. But similarly to the Flame Boomers and the Flame Drones, the Flame Grenadiers can be blown to bits if you set off their fuel tanks by shooting at it. And the Flame Grenadiers, just like the Grenadier Elites and the Standard Grenadiers, were seen throughout the Locust War. And then we have the Locust Ravagers. So the Locust Ravager was the highest ranking subclass of Grenadier. They were made up of the most brutally strong and tremendously resilient Grenadiers in the Locust Horde's army. The Ravagers were charged with being the initial storming force when breaching, clearing and laying waste to key fortified cog facilities and fortifications. The Ravagers are at the top of the Grenadier food chain, similar to how the Palace Guard are at the top of the Theron hierarchy, so they are the Locust Horde's apex assault troops, and they are also armed with the Nasha and Bolo grenades as well, and the Ravagers have the Locust runes for breach and kill branded into their arms, which is their motto. A side note is that in Gears of War 2, Marcus notes the appearance of markings on the bodies of Locust Drones following the first encounter with the Kantus, but they were never shown nor elaborated on further. Now these brands are presumably the same markings Marcus was referring to. So to elaborate on the Locust runes, the Locust runes basically represent the writing of the Locust Horde. They consist of symbols which represent individual letters. However, the Locusts pronounce these letters and symbols the same as Tyron. The Locust runes were based on a lexigram board found in the Mount Kadar laboratory where the Locust Horde was created, in order for the scientists to communicate with the drones. So the picture you can see is a computerized version of the Locust language. So the Locust also had a computerized version of the Locust runes. These characters are cleaner and less calligraphic than the handwritten alphabet. Many of the symbols remain similar to the handwritten versions, although some letters differ greatly to the point of being unrecognizable when compared to the handwritten counterpart. So that's a bit about the Locust runes there. And then the Locust Ravagers also have cylinders strapped to their waist, which are Locust breaching charges. And these were used when creating entry points in enemy facilities and fortifications. Now when it comes to the Locust Ravagers armor, it really differentiates from other Grenadier armor. The overall armor aesthetic was meant to give off a very Juggernaut-esque feel with some gladiatorial inspiration, and I just want to give a big shout out to Parasidian, who worked at the Coalition, who helped bring this character to life and of course made it canon in the Gears of War universe. And then we also have the Locust Hunters. So the Locust Hunter was an elite class of drone that predated the Grenadier and was originally designed with the task of hunting down and killing certain humans such as military and civilian leaders early on in the Locust War. In essence, they were Locust assassins in all but name. The Locust Hunters, they were armed with a deadly torque bow on its right arm, and they were equipped with light armor. Designed to be easily spotted, the Hunter was developed to be the showcase for the deadly weapon. But the torque bow was eventually given to the Theron Guard, and the Hunters were identifiable by their horned-like signature Hunter helmets. The Locust Hunters were eventually deprived of their main design purpose, so the Locust Hunter was stripped of its original armor and given a Nasha shotgun and several frag grenades, becoming the Locust Grenadier. It is said that it was not included in the final game because of conflicts with animations, so they weren't seen in any Gears of War campaigns, but they were seen in multiplayer and official Gears of War media. And we also had the Locust Hunter Elites. So the Locust Hunter Elites were more aggressive and deadly than the lower ranks of Hunters. Hunter Elites were masters in assassination, and they were of course considered a serious threat to the COG High Command. They also bear a strong resemblance to the Locust Grenadiers, but they are seen as more of a threat in battle. They wore one of the least amounts of armor in the entirety of the Locust Horde due to their already toughened hides, acting as enough protection for these assassins. But like their lower brethren, Hunter Elites were originally given torque bows to locate and hunt down very important humans such as military and civilian leaders, but they were eventually replaced by the Theron Guards early on in the Locust War, and they were given Nasha shotguns instead. Nevertheless, they themselves were replaced by the Grenadiers. And in appearance, the Hunter Elite are of course very similar to the standard Grenadier. The only difference between the two is that the Hunter Elite is armoured with a shoulder plate, but the Grenadier is not. So yeah, these were the Locust's master assassins, which were known as the Locust Hunter Elites. And then we also have the Savage variants of the Locust Grenadiers as well. So one of the members of the Savage Locust were of course the Savage Grenadiers. Now, the Savage Grenadier was a Locust drone that appeared around 18 months after the sinking of Jacinto. They are drones that reverted to primal ways, they have become tribalistic, and are much more aggressive, and they use primitive weapons, and they charge at their enemies like barbarians. With access to gunpowder becoming far more scarce, Savage Grenadiers opted to use incendiary grenades rather than bolo grenades due to its bountiful resource of flammable alcohol mix and ease in construction. Unlike the normal Grenadiers, the Savage Grenadiers have not limited themselves to the use of one weapon like the Gnasher. They use a range of weapons, including the Hammerburst assault rifle, the Lancer assault rifle, and the sawed-off shotgun. They would also wear an aviator's hat with goggles, giving them a more savage look than the base Grenadier variants. And then we also have the Savage Grenadier Elite as well. So the Savage Grenadier Elite was the Savage Locust variant of the Grenadier Elite, who we previously talked about, and they are also drones that reverted to primal ways. They have become tribalistic and are much more aggressive, and they use primitive weapons, and they charge at their enemies like barbarians as well. They were the elite Savage assault troops for the Savage Locust, and like the Savage Grenadiers, Savage Grenadier Elites have opted to use incendiary grenades due to the scarcity of black powder. However, their higher rank means that they are privileged in gaining access to the Savage Locust's valuable stash of bolo grenades. And unlike their loyalist brethren, Savage Grenadier Elites actually wear more armor than the Savage Grenadiers. And then we also have the Savage Hunters. Now, the Savage Hunter was an elite troop primarily used to track down the hiding gears and humans of Sera. Hunters are bred for one reason, and they do not relent. It doesn't matter that they are abandoned to the Deadlands, you still can't hide from them. Eventually, they will find you. They of course do live up to their name. So they are known for their habit of finding humans relentlessly, and they are not to be messed with. Despite the disbandment of the Hunters in favour of Grenadiers earlier on in the Locust War, the Savage Locust, due to either desperation or lack of coherent command structure, led to the return of the Hunter Assassins. They are one of the most vicious and degenerate looking locusts out there. Even amongst the standards of the Savage Locusts, they sport large fangs and they resemble more like a snake than they do a locust. And in the Gears of War universe, there are also Lambent Grenadiers. So during Operation Hollow Storm, Delta Squad advanced through the Locust capital Nexus, and they saw many Grenadiers turning Lambent, and they were attacking Nexus during the Locust Civil War, overpowering Locust forces. Lambent Grenadier corpses were found by Delta Squad, and later a squad approached Delta and one of them tried to attack them, but Augustus Cole disposed of it. So the Lambent Grenadier was a Locust Grenadier which had endured a prolonged exposure to Imulsion. It is unknown how long the Lambent existed, but they were discovered within the first 2 days of Frost by the Therons while fighting the Locust Horde in Nexus, and we can assume that many Lambent Grenadiers also fought against the Locust during the Lambent War as well. As Locust Grenadiers would become infected, they would begin to glow a yellow-greenish signature Lambent colour, and then they would eventually fully mutate into a Lambent Grenadier, just like the Lambent Drones. And as Delta saw in Nexus, the Lambent were overpowering Locust forces, so the Lambent Grenadiers do seem to be a lot tougher than the Locust Grenadiers. The Theron Guard was an organisation of the Locust Horde's military, which represents the elite of the Locust Horde. They were head and shoulders above the lowly Locust Drones in terms of equipment, intelligence and training. They are elite Locust troops, assigned to commando-style raids against high-profile targets, and high-level defensive missions that require the sort of precision the Therons possess and can handle. Some members of the Theron also act as field officers, leading the lesser Locust troops into battle. As elites, the Therons are more powerful, intelligent, accurate with their weapons and better armoured than their contemporaries, and they are invariably better armed as well, making them a significantly greater threat than the lesser ranked Locust troops. They are 6'8" on average. They have grey skin and black scales, just like the drones, but the Therons are easily recognisable from other Locusts on the battlefield. The Therons wear heavy body armour that covers more of the upper body than drone armour, and a long leather-like strip of material hanging from the back of the waist. This trails behind them as they move and gives the impression of a trench coat, combined with armour. Many wear distinctive looking helmets as well, often heavily embellished. Theron armor is laced with bright red flecks, presumably to give them a more imposing appearance. Most Therons use the torque bow as their weapon of choice, and is wielded exclusively by the Therons. It was specifically designed for them, and its advanced design shows that it is far more dangerous and far more utilitarian than many Locust weapons. The torque bow fires an emulsion-fueled, explosive-tipped, armor-piercing projectile that resembles a large arrow. Therons are experts with this weapon with their range, precision and accuracy. Because of this, they are a deadly threat, capable of instantly killing an unprepared gear from a considerable distance. They also make use of the Lancer assault rifle, Hammerburst assault rifle and Nasher shotgun, as well as the Boltok pistol. Unlike drones, Therons are smart enough to make use of dropped weapons, so if an allied Locust dies in their presence, they may raid their corpses for weapons or ammo. As elites who have better intelligence with better military training, Therons make extensive use of cover and ambushes, and are smart enough to know when a battle is turning against them. You can expect them to flee rather than die if they take too much damage, and for other Locusts to aid the Theron if they become injured. They frequently send drones and grenadiers forward as cannon fodder and to force gears out into the open, so they can take them out with their torque bows. They also often feign retreat in order to lure enemies closer and into preset firing positions. Their battlefield IQ is just of the highest order, so you should never underestimate the Theron Guards. So we've spoken about the Theron Guards as a whole, but let's talk about the different Theron Guard ranks and variations, because of course there were different subclasses within the Theron organization. So first up we have the Theron Sentinels. Their role in the Locust army was that of battlefield commanders, leading Locust troops on the field, and they possessed all the other abilities that a regular Theron would. But a Theron Sentinel also led small teams of Theron Guards. So for instance, when a pack of Theron Guards were designated to a high-profile commando-style raid or another special operation, a Theron Sentinel would be the leader of the pack of Theron Guards. In terms of armor, the Theron Sentinel's armor is almost identical to the regular Theron Guards, except for their signature Theron Sentinel helmet. We also had the Theron Elites, who were also known as the Onyx Therons or the Black Therons, and the Theron Elites were a co-organisation of Locust Theron that appeared shortly after Emergence Day. They were specifically trained and worked under the command of General RAAM, serving as his chosen warriors and sometimes loyal lieutenants. The Theron Elite carried a deadly arsenal, which included torque bows, modified weapons like the Elite Sword-Off Shotgun, Gorgon SMGs, and even krill grenades. They could also manipulate the krill to some extent like General RAAM. They also wear slightly similar armor to General RAAM, which shows their presence and ranking within the Locust military. The Theron Elites were an absolute force to be reckoned with. We also had the Cleaver Therons. Now the Cleaver Therons were Therons armed with a Butcher Cleaver, and they charge into battle and attempt to cut gears to pieces without hesitation. They run right past cover and don't stop until they're on top of you, swinging away with their heavy metal blades. The Cleaver Therons wear red, bulky, heavy armor, similar to that of the Theron Guard and Theron Sentinel. The only difference, however, is that they do not wear the skirt tassels around their waist. They also carry around Butcher Cleavers as their main and only weapon, hence the name Cleaver Theron. There were also the Palace Guards, who were made up of the most decorated and accomplished drones in the Locust Horde's army, and were charged with the defense of the Royal Palace and Nexus and the Queen. As you can see straight away, the Palace Guard's armor is a lot different to the traditional Therons. This is because they were the most decorated drones and they had the biggest responsibility a Locust soldier could have, to protect the Queen and her Royal Palace. So they wore royal armor and a distinctive Royal Theron helmet. Now during Operation Hollow Storm, when Delta 1 were able to breach the defenses of Nexus, the Palace Guards used their intelligence and years of military expertise, setting up ambushes in front of the palace gate and setting up other traps within the palace. But unfortunately, all the Palace Guards encountered were killed, but the Palace Guards all gave their lives in the name of their queen. I also want to quickly go over the military ranks of the Therons, from the bottom to the top. Now the Therons were ultimately Locust Drones. They're not their own species, just to clarify because some people get a bit confused when it comes to that. So when it comes to the Locust Drones, you have your standard Locust Drones, who are the foot soldiers of the Locust Horde. They are standard infantry and have different classes specializing in different forms of combat. Then we have the Locust Grenadiers, who are the Locust shock troopers and are stronger and more aggressive than the drones. Then you guessed it, we have the Theron Guards, who are the elite Locust troops and are head and shoulders above the drones. So these are the drone subclasses and hierarchy, but to look at the ranks within the Theron organization, we firstly have the Theron Guards. Then a level above the standard Therons are the Theron Sentinels, who lead small teams of Therons. Then we have the Theron Elites, General RAAM's loyal lieutenants. And then we finally have the Palace Guards, who are the most decorated and accomplished drones in the army. Now we don't really know where the Cleaver Therons would fit in here, but I'd assume they'd be of the lowest ranks of Therons. As to me, I find it strange as to why they'd be armed with a Butcher Cleaver, and not exclusive weapons like the Torque Bow that the Therons do tend to possess. Now during the Locust War, when the Hollow and Nexus, the Locust's home, was flooded by the coalition of ordered governments in Operation Hollow Storm, the Locust Horde began falling apart. After the flooding of the Hollow, the surviving Palace Guards became the bulk of the Queen's Guard, which was a loyalist army under the direct command of Queen Myrrah, while many of their Theron brothers became part of the Savage Locust. They became known as the Savage Therons. They were previously just your regular Theron Guards and are nearly identical to the original Theron Guards except for the colour of their armour, which is nearly bleached white and garnished with red lights. They also use different weapons most of the time. For example, most Savage Therons use a Butcher Cleaver or sawed-off shotgun rather than their iconic Torque Bow. Some of the Savage Therons ended up living in the Saren Deadlands and were forced to adapt to the sandstorms with new tactics and armour. Like Savage Drones, they burst from the ground to ambush their enemy. They attack with a cleaver, wielding it like a sword. This is a tactic previously used by the Cleaver Therons, from whom the Savage Therons modelled their technique, but unlike their predecessors, they carry more weapons in case they lose their cleavers. Also, within the Savage Locust, they didn't have an organised hierarchical structure, so troops like the Savage Theron were on the same level and rank as the other standard infantry. This was of course not the case within the Locust Horde army prior to the flooding of the Hollows, as the Theron Guards were field commanders and were the elite troops. And then we also have Lambent Therons, that are the elite Locust troops Theron Guards that have been exposed to imulsion long enough to become Lambent Therons. Now the Theron Guards' voices are sibilant and with a definitive whispering hiss, giving them a distinctly menacing appearance. Though it is more intimidating, the hissing and whispering can be a big giveaway to the opponent of your position. Now the Theron's voices are definitely a lot more deeper and menacing than the standard drones. We have never been told why this is as of creating this video, but I believe this could be due to the Therons generally being more experienced, battle-hardened drones, therefore being older drones. It's never been confirmed, but a theory that I have could be that the older the drones become, their voices become a lot deeper and raspier. This makes more sense with the fact that the Palace Guards have an even deeper and raspier voice than the Therons, and the Palace Guards are the most decorated drones in the Locust army, therefore most likely being even older drones, as they would have served for a long time. But yeah, let me know what you think of this little theory in the comment section down below.
I think it's safe to say that's not a natural cave formation.
You were wondering where they come from, Carmine? No! You
So the Locust Kantus were one of the three primary races of the Locust Horde. They were taller and leaner than the Locust Drones, and the Kantus were actually Locust priests, and they fulfilled a support capacity on the battlefield. They reinvigorated injured Locust with their characteristic chanting, and they inspired and bolstered the Locust troops. Now the word Kantus itself comes from the Latin cantus, meaning having been sung, and references its deafening, debilitating and functional battle cry. They are 7 foot on average, and they tend to wield the Gorgon submachine gun and the ink grenade, but at times they are also seen with the hammerburst assault rifle, although that is more uncommon. They are capable of manipulating animals, they are capable of reinvigorating Locust, they are members of the Queen's Guard, and they are field commanders and religious officials. And there were many Kantus variations seen throughout the Locust War, so let's break down the different Kantus variations. So firstly we had the standard Kantus, who were the Locust priests. There were also the Savage Kantus. So the Savage Kantus were the feral counterpart to the Queen's loyal Kantus monks, and the Savage Kantus were formed after the flooding of the Hollow, and the Savage Kantus acted as the shaman to the Savage Locust until their apparent extinction upon the detonation of the Imulsion countermeasure weapon, which ended the Locust War. So without the guidance of their queen, the lost Locust descended into primitive tribes, they themselves changing forever. So the Savage Locust, they were very different from the original Locust. So out of all the Locusts that were separated from the Queen's remnant of the Horde, the Kantus priests actually changed the most. They were hit the hardest. So they reverted to primal shamanistic ways, and their healing screams descended into a dark tone. According to records, few sounds can replicate the terror from the screams of a Savage Kantus. We also had the Locust Zealot. So the Zealot was a ferocious Locust Kantus unleashed upon the coalition of ordered governments, but this was during the early years of the Locust War. Now the Locust Zealot came about because the lead scientist of the Locust Horde, Ukon, harnessed the power of emotion to build his army, and the resulting experiments with the Locust Kantuses led to the creation of the deadly Zealot. So these enhanced Kantuses formed the fierce and unrelenting front line of Ukon's army, and each Zealot wore an injection harness that delivered a continual flow of emotion into their bodies. This amplified the power of their attacks and granted them increased resilience and strength. And just like the standard Kantus, these Kantuses heal and buff surrounding Locusts with the added durability enhancements, but they also have a toxic explosion upon death. And they also had the Zealot helmet, which was different to the standard issue Kantus helmet. We also had the Deviant Kantus. So the Deviant Kantus was a regular Kantus, but was another Kantus that was experimented on by the Locust geneticist Ukon, who was continuing his experimentation by harnessing the power of emotion. So like I said, he found that controlled injections of emotion into his foot soldiers resulted in highly powerful units like the Zealots. But of course, as Ukon was experimenting with emotion, not every experiment had perfect results. So these were the Deviant Kantus, and they were more powerful and savage, but they were a lot less obedient. So although they were more powerful and savage, they were likely very difficult to control. Another Kantus variation was the Locust Armored Kantus. Now the Armored Kantus were an elite armored class of Kantus priest. They were first seen roughly 18 months after the sinking of Jacinto, and they were covered in onyx armor and dual-wielding Gorgon SMGs. So the Armored Kantus, they were a force to be reckoned with. The Armored Kantus wore black-coloured razor-sharp spiked armor, and this armor made them highly resistant to bullet-based weaponry and allowed them to do offensive-based rolls which could slice and tear a downed enemy apart. This serves as an execution, and like normal Kantus, Armored Kantus could heal nearby Locust as well. Now while their armor made them powerful opponents, the Armored Kantus were not invincible. The armor could only withstand so many bullets and only offered mild protection against explosive based weaponry. And the Armored Kantus had the healing abilities of normal Kantus, which just like the regular Kantus, left them vulnerable during healing. Also, just like the Savage Kantus, the Armored Kantus were seen after the flooding of Jacinto, but the Armored Kantus were affiliated with the Queen, whereas the Savage Kantus were not affiliated with the Queen. And the regular Kantus only use a single Gorgon SMG, whereas the Armored Kantus actually attack with dual-wielded Gorgon SMGs, which is actually pretty deadly. And they can also roll into a ball, dealing damage to enemies in their path, which is pretty crazy. And although the Armored Kantus were not invincible, they had extreme durability, and so they had the surprising ability to withstand a small to medium sized blast from a focused Hammer of Dawn strike. Although they will still be injured slightly and knocked down similar to when they are hit by other explosive weaponry, this proved that the Armored Kantus were a force to be reckoned with and are much more difficult to kill compared to the regular Locust Kantus. Now we've spoken about the Kantus and the Kantus variations, but there are also notable Kantus in the Locust army. Notable Kantus as in high ranking Kantus in the Locust army. So first up we have Skorge, and Skorge was the high priest of the Kantus. His personal equipment consisted of ink grenades, a Gorgon burst pistol, and his personal chainsaw staff, which had chainsaws on each end. Like his Kantus monks, he used his vocal cords to communicate with rockworms, and even the riftworm, which he led to destroy the cities of Tolan, Montevado, and Ilima. He could summon tickers and could even perform incredibly high jumps, displaying great agility, and he also had a personal Hydra as his mount. But Skorge was unfortunately killed when Delta Squad, who were riding Reavers, destroyed his Hydra, sending him falling a great height to his death. So moving on, we also have Keith of Roll. Now Keith of Roll was the High Priest of the Trinity of Worms and member of the Locust Council. He served as High Priest during the Lambent War and the early Locust War. Vrol was Queen Mira's advisor on all religious matters relating to the Trinity of Worms, and in essence he was essentially the High Priest before Skorge, and during the Lambent War he seemed to be quite an old Kantus in age. We also have Keita Droke, who was mentioned in the Rise of RAAM comics, but we don't actually know how he looks. Now Keita Droke, or Droke the First as Keita Vrol said, was the original High Priest of the Kantus and member of the Locust Council. He served as High Priest during the Lambent War, and Droke was Queen Mira's advisor on all religious matters relating to the Trinity of Worms, and he was the first to use Imulsion fumes to connect one to a spiritual plane known as the Rift, in order to create prophecies, gain knowledge, and contact the gods that were known as Riftworms. Now Keita Droke was the first Locust to assume the role as Keita, so High Priest of the Trinity of the Worms, which was the holy religion of the Locust Horde, and his work was written into detail for future High Priests like Keita Vrol and Keita Skorge to study and practice. Now Keita Droke eventually died and was succeeded by Keita Vrol, and we don't know how Keita Droke actually died and when he died, but he was succeeded by Keita Vrol, and Keita Vrol was succeeded by Keita Skorge, if that makes sense. And then finally we have the Scarred Kantus. Now this Kantus was only seen in the Gears of War comics as well, and the Scarred Kantus was a very cunning and strategic Kantus monk who commanded Locust forces at Ghislaine. Now this Scarred Kantus was known for his ambush attacks and was known to be quite a strategic Kantus monk. So this Scarred Kantus led the Locust forces during the second battle of Ghislaine, and this Kantus was able to set up an ambush that nearly killed Marcus Phoenix. But during the battle he was eventually killed by Damon Baird and Alex Brand whilst trying to revive a downed drone. And Scarred Kantus actually gets his name because of the big scar over his right eye, and he actually had one orange eye and one white eye, which was pretty interesting. So Boomers were large, brutish, markedly less intelligent Locust who earned their reputation as the Locust Horde's heavy weapon specialists. Several variations appeared over the course of the Locust War and the Lambent Pandemic. While unintelligent, Boomers are extremely dangerous enemies to deal with, as their boom shot can deal a lot of damage or even kill the player in harder difficulties, and they can take a lot of punishment before they die. Fortunately, players can easily tell when they are about to attack, as the Boomers yell before firing their weapon. Boomers were humanoid in shape, but were much taller than the average human or drone, being at least 8 feet tall. Boomers were also bristled with muscle, and they were very fat, making them considerably thicker than other humanoids. Despite this, they were able to move at very surprising speeds. It is unknown how Boomers actually came about, whether they are a special breed of drones or drones that suffer from defects, but it is not currently conclusive. What is known is that they are heavy and physically very powerful, capable of lifting an entire gear with one hand and crushing their heads. Their inner anatomy is presumed to be similar to that of a Locust Drones, as they showed no improvement nor degradation in vision or hearing. On the other hand, Boomers were considerably tougher to kill than their smaller brethren, able to survive a long shot round to the head. So when it comes to the Locust Boomers armor, the large boomer armor is an armor set piece meant only for the boomers due to their large size. Unlike drone armor, boomer armor is made primarily of thick metal plates rather than the more common and flexible leather pieces. The chest piece of the boomer armor is connected via two elongated circles like those of the Cog's trooper armor, suggesting that the Locust got the designs from the Cog during the Pendulum Wars. The chest piece left the belly exposed, but the thick hide and fat of a boomer made such exposure irrelevant. The back of the chest piece had a lock system which allowed specialized boomers like the Flame Boomer to attach an emulsion fuel tank. The shoulder pads were relatively small in contrast to the boomer's size, whilst the leg guards were thick and heavy. All boomer variants wore the same armor owing to its versatility and protection, the possible exception being the Savage Boomer, which had a protected neck guard and an ammo belt to protect himself from a weapon malfunction of his diggers. Boomers were among the least sophisticated members of the Locust Horde, being larger, tougher and markedly less intelligent than other Locusts. Despite this, boomers are incredibly determined and fierce during combat, but luckily for the Therons, this came with a fortunate side effect, a rather peculiar inability to listen to reason. Boomers often charged headlong into battle with little regard for their own well-being. But despite this, boomers could actually learn to use different sorts of equipment on the battlefield, and some even managed to use strategies against their enemies. Some of these were presumably the Mauler elites, which were some of the most fearsome soldiers of the Locust Horde, killing battalions of Onyx guards with ease and even being part of General RAAM's squad during the evacuation of Ilima. One of the signature trademarks of the boomers is that the boomers of all types often shout a single word respective of their weapon. For example, the boomers with the boom shots would shout BOOM! So let's move on to the different boomer variations. So first up, we have the Mauler. So the Mauler was a boomer variant, of course, equipped with a boom shield and a horned helmet that together give them considerable cover from enemy fire. The boom shield they carry can be used by the player if, of course, they kill the Mauler, and all Maulers carry an explosive flail, which they run forward wielding and is very deadly at close range. When the Maulers are shot, they will flinch and deploy their shield to absorb the bullets, making chest shots more difficult. Headshots are more advisable due to its large head, but requires at least 2 shots from a long shot. Now the Mauler subclass actually has some variations as well, so we'll break these down as well. So one of the Mauler variations is the unarmored Mauler. Now this is only seen once currently in Gears media. So the unarmored Mauler served under the Locust Kantus as part of the Locust forces during the Second Battle of Ghislaine. This Mauler was stronger, larger and more muscular than an average Mauler, being able to charge through a wall of solid concrete without even getting a scratch on him, and under the orders of the Locust Kantus, he ambushed Marcus Phoenix, knocking Marcus out cold with one punch, but he was killed by a grenade trap set up by Damon Baird and Alex Brand. Now the unarmored Mauler, he had tremendous strength, and it was actually similar to that of a Berserker, so imagine that, being able to smash through a solid concrete wall with just his fists, and he did so without even hurting himself at all. He also seemed to be a bit more intelligent than a regular Mauler, to at least some degree, as he was able to think quickly by using a large piece of steel as a makeshift shield in the middle of combat to protect himself. Unlike average Maulers, he did not wear any upper body armor, although he did still wear the standard issue Mauler helmet. He also did not carry a boom shield, but he still did carry an explosive flail. Now just a side note, I think this boomer variation, the unarmored Mauler, is the strongest boomer type there is when it just comes to the pure strength and biology of the Locust soldier, the unarmored Mauler. So I do wish we actually get to see more of this guy in the future, whether it's comics or games, whatever it may be. I think this Locust deserves a bit more love in my opinion. And the other Mauler variation was the Mauler Elite. So the Mauler Elite was a unique, more powerful class of the Locust Mauler, which was seen after Emergence Day, and the Mauler Elite was equipped with a horned Gothic style helmet and a boom shield that was actually modified. The Mauler Elite was a deadly foe on the battlefield. Their shields would also deflect fire, making the Mauler Elites a formidable opponent. And the Mauler Elites were actually seen in General RAAM's squad, so it does seem that the Mauler Elites were higher ranking Locust soldiers compared to the standard Maulers and other boomers for that matter. Moving away from the Maulers, we also have the Butchers. Now the Butchers were Locust boomers who served as chefs in the Locust Horde. You heard that right, chefs. So, the Butcher appears to be the lowest rank of all the boomers in the Horde, as they aren't actually assigned to kill anything. All they do is chop up rockworms brought in by Locust hunting parties. They actually wore a large apron over the standard boomer armor with meat hooks attached, and they wore a flat helmet. And a bit about the rockworms themselves. So the rockworm was a creature that lived in the hollow on Serra. Described by Anya as an indigenous cave creature, these large worm-like organisms slither from one tunnel to another, eating the globe fruit that grow on the cavern walls and ceiling of the hollow. They are assumed harmless, but if you get in front of one of their mouths, they will bite, causing light damage. But a boomer and a butcher are basically the same creature, although the butcher has less armor and a large meat cleaver used for cutting up rockworm meat to feed the Locust soldiers. The rockworm meat is taken from Locust hunting parties, generally consisting of 1 to 2 Kantus with many Locust. So the Kantus priests would summon the rockworm, the Locust would kill it, and the butcher would chop it up and serve it to the Locust, and of course the soldiers would eat it. Also, when the butcher was encountered, they will tend to say, "Hunger." However, butchers that had too much exposure to emulsion mutated into Lambent gunkers. The arm that held their cleavers mutated, connecting the cleaver to the body, and their other arm mutated into a stump of molten emulsion that could be lobbed at enemies from afar. Lambent gunkers were actually a lot bigger than the butchers. They were around 10 feet tall on average and appeared on the surface of Serra after the sinking of Jacinto City. These guys were basically Locust butchers turned Lambent, but we have actually never seen any other boomer Lambent variations, which is, I think, in my opinion, strange in a way, but it is also room for exploration for the coalition if they wish to expand on the Locust and the Lambent. For me, it would be cool to see Lambent variations of the Mauler, the standard boomer itself, and so on. Next up, we have the Flame Boomer. So the Flame Boomer was a boomer variant recently fielded by the Locust Horde. They are equipped with a Scorcher flamethrower, fueled by a set of emulsion-filled canisters on their back, similar to their Flame Grenadier counterparts. They wear slightly more armor than standard boomers, including a heat-resistant helmet that fully covers their face and their head, but despite their helmets, they are susceptible to headshots like most boomers. But unlike other boomers, the Flame Boomers will try to flank you, which suggests that they could be slightly more intelligent. Also, due to their lighter weapons, the Flame Boomer can move considerably faster than other boomers, matched only by the Mauler. But yeah, if one of the boomers are about to burn you with a Scorcher, he will actually laugh. But a quicker and easier way to kill the Flame Boomers is to simply shoot the canisters on their backs, which causes the tanks to rupture and blow the Flame Boomers to bits. We also have the Grinder. So the Grinder, aka the Buckethead, was a boomer variant recently fielded by the Locust Horde. They are equipped with a Mulcher machine gun, which they can use to lay down thunderous suppressive fire on enemy troops. They wear standard armor, with the exception that their chestplate has a high collar to protect their neck from both enemy fire and possibly from being hit and burnt by the shells expelled from their own gun. But to protect their heads, they sport a high flat-topped cylindrical helmet with the Locust symbol shining in the center. Their helmets make them less vulnerable to headshots than other boomers except for the Mauler. And when the Grinders are about to fire their Mulcher, they say "Mine!" And at times they are seen pairing up with Maulers, which is a really deadly combination of both fire and cover, but the Grinders do seem to be vulnerable to the Scorcher flamethrower. We also have another boomer variation which is called the Tremor. So the Tremor was a boomer variant which participated in the Locust attack on Ilima City. Tremors had the unique ability to summon Cedars by using their massive hammers to nail a special tremor spike into the ground that the Cedar can home onto. And the Cedars were large 8-legged beasts that fired Nemesis spores out of a second mouth on their rear end. When the Locust Horde deployed Cedars onto the battlefield, they tended to use these creatures as artillery and anti-air weapon emplacements. They have also been known to jam radio transmissions with their very presence. Tremors wear similar armor to the Butcher class of boomer. They have the same type of helmet and chestplate, but without the apron of course. And on their belt is a sheath that holds the homing spikes for the Cedars. Tremors' battle cry would be "Pound!" and they were not seen often during the Locust War. They were seen in Gears of War 3's DLC, RAAM Shadow. Now the Tremors had a signature weapon, and this was the Thumper, and this was a large metal rod which also had the Locust symbol inscribed into it as well. An additional point is that the Mauler Elites and the Tremors were part of RAAM's squad during the evacuation of Elima, so they were higher ranking Locust soldiers compared to the other Boomer variations. And now we move on to the Savage variants of the Boomers. So one of the members of the Savage Locust were the Savage Boomers. So the Savage Boomers were Boomer variants that appeared around 17 years after Emergence Day. They were armed with a digger launcher, and they have different armor to the traditional Boomer. They have a large pointed helmet that only shows their mouth area, a large collar like the Grinder, a large breastplate, and they have a belt stretching from shoulder to hip with extra digger projectiles. These Boomers have reverted to a tribal mindset just like the other Savage Locust. Now some of these Savage Boomers were armed with the digger launcher, and some were armed with the butcher cleaver. Some would be armed with the boomshot grenade launcher as well. Now it is unknown if the Savage Boomers used the butcher cleaver like the traditional butchers to chop up food, but in the Deadlands there would have been no rockworms, so perhaps they chopped up animals and humans instead, but that's just a theory. The Savage Boomers' main weapon though was the digger, and the digger launcher was a unique single shot grenade launcher that was used by the Boomers of the Savage Locust remnants. It fired a small creature which was called of course the digger with explosives attached. Now the diggers, they were small burrowing creatures, and when fired they burrow under the ground behind cover, and then they pop up and explode in the air, killing the enemies in that cover. They can burrow through dirt, rock and wood, and when fired into a target, the digger will latch onto the target and chew into its chest before exploding inside the victim. And if you actually listen closely as the digger is heading for you, you can actually hear it say nom 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 nom. Coming in at just under 9 feet tall on average were the Scions, former Locust drones that had survived the Locust War. The word Scion means descendant, especially of a notable family. Exceptionally larger and stronger than their previous forms, the Scions are known to wield heavy weapons. They could wield the heavy weapons that the Boomers were known to wield, thanks to their size and strength. They also possessed the ability to empower and rally swarm drones by emitting osmium dust. This was the case in Gears 4, but wasn't in Gears 5, so I'm not sure what caused this to change. It may have been an oversight in my opinion, but I'm not sure. Regardless, they were field commanders, and as such would have inspired and bolstered the lesser troops. With the Lambent extinct and Nexus destroyed, the Scions intended to continue what they had started in the previous war, to kill all humans and to colonize the surface of Sera. They also sought to replace their fallen queen with her daughter Reina Diaz, as they could not wage war as effectively as they once had without a queen to guide them. While it is unknown how long the Scions had been raiding settlements and outside villages, the Scions appeared to have kidnapped thousands of people by the time of their discovery, as many of the swarm soldiers had already begun using weapons and armor used by their predecessors. Scions served much the same role that the Locust Boomers and the Locust Kantus did prior to Gears of War 4. They are large, durable, easy to identify, and are the deadliest of all the humanoid swarm given their toughness and handling of heavy weapons. Scions stand tall above the field and move slowly, making them easy to pick out and target. Their bulk prevents them from entering cover, but they can vault over cover that's in their path. They cannot be chainsawed or bayonet charged through either, but they can be briefly staggered by inflicting enough damage to them. Unlike the Boomers of the past, Scions don't always preface their attacks with a phrase, so you can't solely rely on auditory clues when fighting them. Various Scions are known, with each differing in appearance and weapon choice. So there are the traditional Scions that wield a boomshot. These Scions have large chrysalis formations on their shoulders and the back of their necks. Additionally, they lack upper body armor. Then we have the armored Scions, which are almost identical to a boomshot Scion. These Scions lack the chrysalis formations that their boomshot counterparts have. Additionally, these Scions wield upper body armor for their left shoulder and chest and wield drop shots. In the Gears 4 campaign, these Scions also wield buzzkills. We have the heavy Scions, which are armored Scions that wield a mulcher. These Scions are different as they lay down suppressing first before approaching, and their armor only covers their right shoulder, the front of the chest, behind the neck, and a helmet. Then we have the Scion Elites, which are heavily armoured Scions that look far different than the other variations, closely resembling a Locust drone. However, over half of the right side of its face is covered with chrysalis formation that also covers their hands. They also wield a boom shield on their back, but they never use it. The speaker from the Gears 4 campaign was also a Scion Elite, who I'd assume would have been one of the higher ranking Scions of the Swarm. Then we have my favourite Scion variation, the Wardens. Similar to Scion Elites, Wardens have a drastically different appearance as compared to their counterparts, particularly the massive amount of chrysalis formation across their entire body, their armour and overall size. They did not shed at all. Vanguards of the Swarm. These Scions are nearly impervious to gunfire due to the crystal formations, with the exception of their heads. The only armour they need and wear is a helmet to protect their face, a left shoulder guard and a strap along their chest with the Locust emblem on it. These Scions also wield dual breaker maces. The appearance of a Warden means the Swarm plan to turn the current location into a new hive. It is also noted that these Scions are significantly taller than their counterparts, coming in at over 10 feet tall. These guys are absolute monsters, and are probably even taller than General RAAM himself, who was 10 feet tall. Whether they're as deadly as him is a debate for another day. So that, my friends, is every Locust race explained. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider subscribing for more lore content just like this. Also, a very special thank you to the YouTube channel members, Jason, Slippery Man Gravy, and Gears Maniac 06 for helping support the channel. I'm your host Abz, and as always, I will catch you next time.